The ground is supposed to be static and solid, but what if the ground were dynamic and flexible? While walking down Broadway, John and Susan find it odd that the green space in front of the Armed Forces Recruiting Station in Times Square appears to be moving. In disbelief, they look closer, and the landscape is ever so slightly moving up and down underneath the feet of children. They notice that the surface is responding to the people around it. John and Susan find these interactions odd, so they too begin to interact with the landform. An initial design of a morphing ground explored the idea of a seating area and an interactive playground for children. The model generated for this concept explored the capabilities of such a surface and gave much insight. This model illustrated that the morphing ground needs to be put into context, that the actuation points needed to be evenly spaced across the area so that the full range of motion could be achieved, and that a safety net would need to run under the surface of the ground to fill the gaps that the actuation created. The morphing ground consists of a flexible surface that is activated by the inputs of two IR proximity sensors and is actuated by 3 motors. 3 LEDs are used to captivate onlookers and convey information about the surface. The ground can perform 4 main movements based on sensor data. However, the time of sensor activation is important because the motors are programmed to move from the positions from which they last stopped. John and Susan's experience was brought to life by the interaction of people within the environment. They noticed that the surface moves to 4 different shapes. The first instance is when no one has triggered the sensors. During this time, 2 motors move in opposite directions. The back motor rotates to move the surface up, while the middle motor rotates to move the surface down. During this movement, the 3 LEDs alternate blinking on and off. The second instance is when they both stand on the east side of the surface. Here, only the left sensor is triggered, and the middle motor rotates from the angle at which it stopped to move the middle of the surface up. While this movement is occurring, the blue LED is on. The third instance is when they both stand on the west side of the surface. Here, only the right sensor is triggered, and the back motor rotates from the angle at which it last stopped to move the back part of the surface up. The white LED blinks during this movement. The fourth instance is when they are on opposite sides of the surface. This triggers both sensors, and the back motor moves from its current position to move the surface up. Then the middle motor moves from its current position to move the surface up, while the back motor moves from its current position to move the surface down. The 3 LEDs blink on and off at the same time during this movement. Then the side motor proceeds to pull the front of the surface to the left and then releases the surface to the right, creating another dimension in which the surface can move. The red LED blinks during this movement. Through further research, the morphing ground concept was expanded to a fun, interactive, sensory-driven, playground-like environment that serves as an urban landscape.